Ready to turn your brilliant podcast idea into reality? If you've been dreaming about launching a podcast, there's never been a better time to start. The podcasting world is thriving, and your unique voice is exactly what it needs. I am thrilled to invite you to my free live masterclass, Podcasting 101, How to Start, Record, and Profit from Your Show. And I only teach it live once a year. In this 1-hour masterclass, you'll learn how to start podcasting with equipment you already own, create content that attracts listeners around the clock, and make money from your show in ways that go beyond sponsorships. As my gift for joining me live, you'll receive my ultimate equipment checklist featuring my exact professional setup, plus budget-friendly recommendations that'll have you sounding like a pro from episode 1. You'll walk away with a clear action plan and everything you need to finally move from idea to launched podcast. Claim your spot now at freepodcastclass.com. That's freepodcastclass.com. The world is waiting to hear what you have to say. Join me at freepodcastclass.com. I'm going to say it. Everyone's wrong about podcasting. People are telling you it's too late, or it's too saturated, or it's simply too hard. But here's what they don't know. 91% of podcasts are basically dead. So while everyone is scared to start, you are walking into wide open territory. This episode, it's your roadmap to becoming the voice your ideal clients can't wait to hear. All right, let's go. I'm Jenna Kutcher, and I help you trade hustle for purpose and build a business that gives you the life you actually want to live. From a $300 Craigslist camera to a 7-figure business I run from home, I've learned that success isn't just about what you do, it's about how you live. Here, you'll get strategies that work, systems that give you your time back, and steps that turn your effort into results and impact. If you're ready for clarity, confidence, and a business that feels as good as it looks, you're in the right place. This is the Goal Digger Podcast. Can we talk about something that has been driving me absolutely crazy? Like, everyone keeps saying that if you're starting a podcast now, you're too late, or that you've, quote, missed the boat. And meanwhile, I'm over here watching entrepreneurs who are quietly building sustainable businesses with surprisingly small but deeply engaged audiences. Now, I have learned a lot after podcasting for nearly a decade with over 100 million downloads. But here's one thing that I've learned. The people who are quick to tell you that you're too late are usually the same people who tried and gave up after 3 episodes or never got their show launched. And while everyone is spinning their wheels, trying to go viral on TikTok or show up on Instagram 3 times a day, smart entrepreneurs are building something different. They're building something that actually lasts. Now, I can practically hear you thinking, okay, Jenna, well, I love this idea, but I can barely keep up with what I'm currently doing. How am I supposed to add another thing to my plate? But here's what might surprise you. When you do podcasting right, it doesn't really add a ton to your workload. In fact, I would argue that it can replace a lot of the things you're currently doing. Like one conversation or one episode can become your email content, your social posts, your next YouTube video. I want us to think differently as we work through this episode together, because what I'm about to show you is exactly why I believe that starting late can be your secret weapon. And I want to walk you through how and why you should become that voice in someone's AirPods in the next 30 days. Now, as I walk through this, if you are someone who you need to see something to believe it, I want to invite you to join me. I have a step-by-step roadmap for all of this. I will walk you through how to start, how to record, and how to profit from your show for free in my masterclass, Podcasting 101. I will literally break it all down. You can watch me walk you through this. And all you have to do is save your seat right now at freepodcastclass.com. That's freepodcastclass.com. It is an amazing masterclass where we go deep into the world of podcasting and talk through relevant strategies that work for starting your show today. So freepodcastclass.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive on in. So I wanted to set this episode up a little bit differently. I love myself a good hot take, and I am someone who always has her ear to the ground in terms of what are people saying about the strategies that I am seeing work, not just for me, but for my students and for my community. And so I kind of want to dispel some myths. I kind of want to talk about some of the hot takes that I'm hearing. And I want to prove to you why we need to look at this differently, think differently, and also argue why I think there has never been a better time to enter the world of podcasting. Okay, so hot take number one is this. There is this saturation myth going around, and I get it. I mean, it is easy to look around at some of the stats and think, what do I possibly have to offer? Or why would I add to the noise? Or it's already been done, or everyone is starting a podcast. But here's the thing. I believe that the saturation myth is actually your golden ticket. Now, here's the reality check. Everyone could check a stat that is going to tell you that there are 4 million podcasts that exist. And that is true. That's a massive number, right? 4 million podcasts. For me, whenever I see that something is being done, I look at it as a way of seeing that people have found something that's working, right? Like I look at it and I'm like, this is just painting the possibility. 4 million people think this is worth it. Amazing. But I could understand why someone would look at that stat and think, whoa, it is way too saturated. But here's what's missing from that stat. You could look at 4 million podcasts that have been put up into the ether, and you would not recognize that only 357,000 of those have published an episode in the last 30 days. That is a 91% abandonment rate. Now, here's why I especially love and hate this stat. It makes me really sad that many people tried to start podcasting and couldn't stay consistent with it, because there is a simple way to add podcasting to your strategy. And I'm going to hit on that in just a minute with another hot take, without it feeling like it's not sustainable. And so it kind of breaks my heart that many people tried and then didn't stay consistent, but it also leaves a lot of room for people who follow my system to find a lot of success, because podcasting is literally just a system that you can create and follow. You don't have to invent a new way to do it. There's already one out there. Now, here's why I'd argue that the golden ticket idea is real, is because in recent years, the podcast discovery algorithms have gotten way smarter. And this is a huge benefit to people that can commit to consistency. Here's why. Apple Podcasts now prioritizes consistent shows over one-hit wonders, over people that maybe published a handful of episodes and then fell off. Now, Apple Podcasts is literally going to help you rise to the surface in terms of the search and discoverability of your show if you are somebody who can show up consistently. Same thing with Spotify. Spotify has an algorithm, and what it does is their algorithm rewards weekly publishing schedules. The platforms are literally designed to push active shows to the top, meaning that, yeah, maybe there might be 4 million podcasts out there, but they are not publishing. And so you are competing with a much smaller pool than the stats would want you to believe. And so here's the strategy. And some of this is still consistent with what I've taught in the past. Some of it has changed a little bit. So if you are going to launch a podcast now, here's what you want to consider. So first, you want to launch with 3 episodes minimum. I have said this from the very beginning. Even when I launched my show nearly a decade ago, I followed this advice. Now, here's why. If you only launch your show with 1 episode, you are not giving people enough to chew on. You want to give listeners something to binge. You want them to subscribe because they cannot wait to listen to the next one. And you want them to spend as much time with you as possible from the jump. So help them to see what they can expect from you and your show, and give them a bit of a variety with those first episodes that you're going to launch with. This is something I teach inside of my program, the Podcast Lab. This is something my students often do. So the second piece of advice that I have is, if you were going to start a podcast now, is you want to commit to a weekly publishing schedule for your first 12 weeks minimum. So considering, can you release 1 new episode per week for 12 weeks? Now, after that, you could transition to every other week or once a month. But if you could commit to 12 episodes dropped weekly, that will really help your relevance in terms of those algorithms, and it'll just help you get into a groove. A lot of times we overcomplicate things. And so when you create a system that is reliable and repeatable and sustainable, you'll start to see areas that you can either simplify, outsource, or where you can expand. And so if you can commit to weekly publishing just for the first 12 weeks, I think that will really help you get into a groove with your podcast, help your listeners develop the type of habits that keep them tuning in and coming back for more, and also allow you to work out the kinks in your system. And then lastly, for your strategy now, you want to use the podcast graveyard to your advantage. So what I mean by this is like spend some time researching, search your niche, see how many shows haven't posted since say 2023, take a look at different topics, type in keywords that your ideal audience might be typing in. There is so much gold to be mined in terms of using keywords and using the podcast platforms like a modern day Google and seeing what's popping up and what might spur some ideas within you. I bet that if you spent like 20 minutes just researching using keywords that your ideal audience would use to find someone just like you could easily come up with 12 different topics, ideas, guests, things that you want to cover on your podcast, making it feel way less intimidating and way more exciting. I think that one of the things that frustrates me so much is that everyone often seems to be waiting for this like quote perfect moment, and you do not need to wait. Like while everyone else is waiting, you can be building this unshakable foundation just following these little nuggets of strategy. The podcast landscape in 5 years is going to be rewarding the people who started showing up consistently today. So let that be you. I often hear things like, the best time to start a podcast is 3 years ago. The next best time is today. And I really think that that is even more relevant now. But before I get to hot take number 2, I want to share a student success story. So my student, Lizzie, who was actually a guest on this podcast, she was someone who absolutely thought she was too late to start a business podcast because the space felt crowded. She was someone who was dealing with major, like massive imposter syndrome, and along with that, tech overwhelm. Let me tell you, I am the least techie person out there, so I understand that fear. But here's what happened. Lizzie followed my exact launch strategy and she committed to weekly episodes. Now she's in the top 1% of podcasts globally and has over 600,000 downloads. Her show has ranked as high as number 8 in marketing podcasts on Apple in the US. But the real kicker is that the podcast opened up multiple income streams for her. I'm talking affiliates, ad revenue, course sales, consulting. She went from feeling too late to the top 1% because she started when everyone else was quitting. If you want to check out Lizzie, her podcast is called How to Sell Your Stuff on Etsy. She is phenomenal, and we'll also link in the show notes to the episode where she shares her podcasting story on it because it is so inspiring. All right, hot take number 2. Get this. I believe that your closet setup can outperform a $5,000 studio. So I need you to know this about this podcast. I have recorded some of Goal Digger's most downloaded episodes in my walk-in closet. I have used towels and comforters as sound treatments. I have thrown throw pillows on the dashboard of my parked car in my garage. I have recorded this podcast all over the place. And one of the coolest things about starting a podcast right now is that audio quality has plateaued. And that is a good thing. What I mean by that is the difference between a $50 mic and a $500 mic is getting smaller every year. Like the gap is closing, and it is really easy to have amazing sound without having to be super tech savvy, without having to have the most expensive equipment or a fancy studio. I mean, when I tell you I launched this podcast from the front seat of my car and it was November in the Midwest, it was freezing. I was turning into a human icicle, but I was recording in my car because I did not have a good audio space. And then when we moved back to Minnesota, I recorded hundreds, and I mean hundreds of episodes in my spare closet. And it wasn't like a studio space closet. It was literally the spare closet with like random junk boxes that move from house to house. You know, the ones that you like never unpack because you're not even sure what's in them, which you really don't need anything that's in them because you never unpack them. That kind of closet. I literally would have my computer propped up on a suitcase. I had room for one tiny little chair in there. and I had zero air ventilation. Like I felt like I sucked the oxygen out of the air every time I recorded a podcast. So I have recorded this podcast in so many different places. Now, here's what's different now and why I think that there has never been a better time to start a podcast. First off, smartphone recording apps now have built-in noise reduction that rivals professional software. What does that mean? That means you can record incredible audio straight to your phone. Like it has never been easier to get quality audio. Speaking of this, there are AI-powered editing tools that can clean up basically any audio automatically. Let me tell you a quick story. So a few weeks ago, I did a round of interviews and we had to move our interviews on to Zoom. And we were recording on Zoom. I record on Zoom often, so I'm super familiar with it. And one of my guests had an AI note taker on the call with us. And I had stopped our recording because we were talking about personal stuff before we actually hit record on the episode. And the AI note taker had said recording at the top. And so when I went to restart the recording, I thought it was already recording. I let it go. Anyways, we finish up this epic guest interview, only for me to discover that I had never actually hit record. And the only thing that was recording that entire time was her AI note taker. Now, the AI note taker was recording audio, video, and our transcript. And so she's like, don't worry, I've got the audio. The AI note taker took it. I'll send it over to you. Well, she sent it over and the audio was horrible. And I was horrified. I don't want to have to re-record that episode. It was like so good. So I sent it to our editor. He worked his magic and it still was not sounding good. Like I was not feeling comfortable in airing it. So I was trying to figure out all the different things I could do. Well, I did a little research and there was an AI editing tool and I literally ran that audio through it. And oh my gosh, it is a game changer. You could literally take like a voice memo on your phone and make it sound like a professional podcast these days. And so I'm not even going to tell you what episode it is because you're not going to be able to tell because it sounds up to par with all the quality. And so when you think that you could record on your iPhone, you can run your audio through free AI powered editing tools, you could have an epic studio sound from the comfort of anywhere that you are on your phone. And so I just think it's a beautiful time, especially for people who are intimidated by tech or they're on the go, or maybe they're just going to record their podcast while they're driving home from the school drop-off line. You have never had a better opportunity to start recording. The thing is that I found is like listeners care more about consistency than perfect audio. Like, are you showing up? Are you delivering value? Are you doing what you say you're going to do? Does your content match the title? Like those types of things matter. And those are the things you're in control of. And so I just think, man, I would give anything to start now, have all of these tools available to me because there have been so many times where tech has been the hang up for me. So if I were going to start my podcast now, knowing that you don't need to have fancy tech or fancy tools, here's what I would do. So first, I would still buy a USB microphone that just plugs right into your computer. I would get one that's under $100. There are some amazing ones. You can go on Amazon, you can check reviews, but I don't think you need a super fancy mic. Next, I would try to find a space that at least had decent acoustics. Now, again, you have AI tools at your disposal, so you can use them if you need to, but I always like having more compact spaces, having carpet or some sort of fabric that can catch echoes. And one other hack that has worked really well for me over the years is instead of having an actual studio, I made a little studio for my microphone. I literally bought tools off of Amazon and you can buy just like a little box and some foam and stick your microphone into it. And that can greatly reduce echo as well. And it's like $30. And so again, I would start with a cheap mic. I would try to find the best place or space or create one myself for recording. And then I would use tools that I'm familiar with if I was going to do interviews. So like using Zoom. Now, I just gave you an example of where Zoom failed me, but Zoom is very easy. Most people are used to it. Most people already have the app on their phone. They're used to recording on it. It's pretty easy. And so using tech that you're familiar with so it doesn't feel like one more thing you've got to learn. And then lastly, I would consider batching episodes. So batch working is something that helps me so much as somebody with ADHD. Essentially, batch working is essentially where you take one thing and you just focus on it. So if I sit down and record a few podcasts in one sitting, I tend to do better. One, because I only have to set up and take down once. Two, I kind of remember what I said in the last one, so I'm not repeating myself. And three, you find your groove. Like whenever I'm starting to record a podcast, it probably takes me 5 takes just to get out the intro and to like find my recording groove. And so batch recording can save you a ton of time And it can allow you to build up a library of content that you can release in a future date so that you're never sitting there scrambling thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to record again to get this out by next Wednesday or whatever that is. The thing that I want you to hear is that you don't need perfect conditions to start. I know you think you do, but I will tell you that like authenticity will beat perfect audio every single time. And when you recognize that your voice creates intimacy that nothing else can match, that text can't match, that social media can't match, when you use that voice, you are going to build that know, like, and trust factor that you are trying so hard to build on platforms that aren't reciprocating your desires. And so when you can show up consistently, that will build trust way faster than sporadic posting or waiting until you have the perfect setting and the perfect equipment in order to do that. Let me quick tell you a story about Jen. So Jen is one of my students. She was 1000% paralyzed by tech. Like just all of the tech setup fears, Jen had them. She was also feeling like, oh gosh, I have to create the studio space so that I can have a podcast. And honestly, when I look at situations like this is where our perfectionism turns into procrastination, right? She heard about how I was recording in my closet and it switched her mindset immediately. She realized that she could literally use any small space to record. And so she launched her Flourishing Over 50 podcast within weeks using very basic equipment. Since she launched, she's already started recording and editing her own episodes. She's been booked on 10 other podcasts as a guest. And her exact words to me were, if you can start small, so can I. Now, if tech is something that really does freak you out, or you're wondering, okay, what gear do I actually need? I'm getting really overwhelmed looking on Amazon. I just want you to know I have a podcast gear guide. It is every setup I have ever had for this podcast, including every item, my current setup, my past setups, my free setups, my paid setups. And it is a free bonus when you sign up and show up for my Podcasting 101 Masterclass. So if you want my ultimate podcasting gear guide, go to freepodcastclass.com, save your seat, and it will be delivered to you automatically when you sign up and show up for my masterclass. And I'm going to tell you, I cover gear in the masterclass itself. So if gear is something that freaks you out, make sure you save your seat so we can cover it and you can really calm those fears before you start recording. Hot take number 3 is this. Your podcast, and this is spicy, your podcast, I truly believe, can replace your entire content strategy. Okay, hear me out. When I look at what so many entrepreneurs are doing, and when the statistics show me that entrepreneurs are spending 20 hours a week marketing, and they're spending so many hours a week on content creation, I want to say to them, you don't have a content problem, you have a systems problem. And here's what I mean by that. When you look at your to-do list and you're seeing 6 different content tasks, I want to argue that you could do one that can become those 6. Here's what I mean by that. When you podcast and you start a podcast today, what you can do and what you're able to do is you can repurpose one podcast episode across platforms. This is now just expected. It's what so many people are doing so incredibly well. And so essentially what I'm saying is that your podcast becomes your content hub. It's not just another content burden. What's incredible about the era we find ourselves in is that AI can become your podcasting assistant. So it can help with research, it can help with preparation, it can help with outlines, it can help with show notes. It can help you take one piece of content and turn it into a bunch of different assets that you can use across all different platforms. Like think about it. One 30-minute recording could become a podcast episode, 4 social media posts, an email newsletter content, a YouTube video, a blog post, a LinkedIn article, pins on Pinterest. Like one podcast can become all of that super easily. What's also exciting is that I feel like when we're thinking about creating content, you want to kind of think in terms of buckets. And so I often think of like educational content, inspirational content, and then more like lifestyle or behind the scenes content. And when you think about your podcast in those different realms, you can scratch so many itches that you have in terms of content creation and creating for your audience. So like I said, you can literally record one podcast episode and then splice and dice it and use all the different pieces of content from your outline to your show notes to create content for all different types of platforms to reach your diverse audience everywhere. And so what's amazing about today's era is that you can create AI prompts that will help you take one podcast transcript and slice and dice it for all the places you want to show up online. And I think that this is honestly the best way to get more time, like to claim back more time freedom in your life, because this idea solves your overwhelm problem. Instead of being everything to everyone online, you become the voice for your people through one consistent medium, meaning your podcast, that can work while you sleep and that works long after you hit publish. Let me tell you a story about Shannon Arner. So Shannon and her husband were students of mine, and Shannon felt so excited to start a podcast, but had zero direction. And honestly, she worried about having enough content, right? Like, it's like, am I going to run out of things to say? The breakthrough for her came when she stopped thinking about podcasting as another content channel and started seeing it as her primary content system. She and her husband now have over 100 episodes of the Arner Adventures podcast and over 200 5-star reviews. And what's so cool about that is they have created this content hub and used it as the primary place where their audience goes. Now, beyond that, they've done something really cool that I just want to call out. So they have been able to get sponsorship proceeds from their podcast, which is amazing, right? And I'm going to talk about sponsors in just a second. But what they've been able to do is they've been able to direct a portion of their sponsorship proceeds to mental health advocacy groups, which means they are literally turning their content into a force for change that they actually care about. And I don't know about you, but I think that anyone that goes into podcasting wants to make a difference. And it can be hard to connect the dots on how that is done. There are so many different ways you can do that. But I think that Shannon and her husband have done an incredible job of doing just that. So let's talk about money and sponsors, right? My hot take number 4 is this: small audiences can fund big dreams. And I'm going to argue this is why a niche audience can win. So the reality check, in my opinion, is that everyone thinks they have to have these big, like Joe Rogan numbers. And if you are stuck and paralyzed in that thought, or if you think that is the only way a podcast can be worth it, you are missing a massive opportunity. While everyone else is chasing these big numbers or thinking they can't do it because they'll never hit those, smart entrepreneurs are actually building sustainable businesses, leveraging super small, super engaged audiences. One of my favorite things about podcasting is this: podcast listeners listen to podcasts, plural, meaning you are not necessarily in direct competition with every single person in your category. You are not fighting for a spot because the average podcast listener subscribes to 7 shows. So as a podcast host, you're not just competing for their only slot. You are being invited in to an arsenal of different podcasts. Like, I listen to so many different podcasts in different genres. Like, I listen to reality TV breakdowns. I listen to health podcasts. I listen to marketing podcasts. I listen to interviews. Like, I love diversity in what I'm listening to. And so what I love is that you don't have to feel like in order to be the best podcaster, you have to be the only podcast people listen to. When you recognize that podcast listeners are listening to many different podcasts, it just means that you can pull your seat up to the table and sit down with confidence. And so why I think that niche markets are amazing and should not be undervalued, especially now, is that we can look at different ways to drive results with our podcast. So gone are the days where you think that podcast monetization is the only way to drive results with a podcast. Podcast monetization has evolved so much beyond just paid ads. And what I love about that is that it makes you not just chase vanity metrics in order to get a CPM or in order to get somebody to sponsor your show. You can look at some really creative ways to move the needle with your podcast. The thing to understand about podcasts is that listeners have way higher purchasing intent than social media followers, meaning a download or a subscriber is way more valuable than a follower on a platform. And so it's interesting when you understand that you go from trying to chase vanity metrics to going deep with the people that you are serving. And that leads us to intimacy. And I think that intimacy is one of the best things that your podcast can unlock for you. Because not only does your audience just invite you into their lives, like I think of all the places I listen to podcasts. I listen to them in the car. I listen to them in the shower. I listen to them in the sauna. I listen to them when I'm working out. Like I listen to them in the garden. I listen to podcasts all the time. And so the intimacy of podcasting creates way stronger buyer relationships. And it doesn't mean that that's only geared towards buying other people's products. That can mean buying your offers or directing people to offers that you love without having a paid sponsorship. A 2024 Edison report showed that 56% of listeners of podcasts have a household income of $75,000. That is a lot higher than the average household income of people scrolling on social media. What does this mean? It means that listeners have more disposable income and are more likely to take action with somebody who is showing up and adding value into their earbuds week in and week out. So if I were to start a podcast knowing this right now, here's what I'd focus on. So I'd focus on engagement depth over download numbers. Again, we're not after vanity metrics. We're about like going deep and not wide. So how can you continue to show up consistently and add value to your listeners' lives? The next thing I would focus on is creating a clear listener journey from your podcast to something that is of value for you. So like, what is the direct result? How will you measure your results beyond just money coming in? Would it be email subscribers? Would it be subscribers on other channels? Would it be selling your offers or your coaching or your consulting? Like, what is the clear listener journey and how can you evaluate your success outside of just money? The next thing I would consider, and I'm going to go deeper on this in just a minute, is how can you use your podcast as a networking tool and not just look at it as like content you need to create and put out into the world. This is an area where I think people undervalue how incredible podcasting is. And don't worry, it's going to be hot take number 6. And then lastly, if I were starting now knowing this and thinking more about a niche audience, I would recognize the fact that like, I'm not just building an audience, I'm building the right audience, right? The level of engagement that podcasts offer is insane. Like you are literally in people's ears for 20, 30, 60 minutes. No other content platform gives you this amount of uninterrupted attention with your ideal clients. And so you do not want to belittle this fact or ignore it. This is why podcasting is only going up from here. Before I move on to hot take number 5, I have to tell the story of Tara Phillips. So Tara was somebody who thought that literally nobody would listen to content about what she was passionate about, which is autism education. Like surely she thought that market is like way too niche, but she discovered something so crazy powerful. Nicheness creates loyalty. So get this, in less than a year, Tara hit 42,000 downloads with her podcast, the Autism Little Learners Podcast. And more importantly, her listeners, which are special ed teachers, speech language pathologists, and parents, make her podcast part of their weekly routine. The tight community that she built became her customer base for her courses, for her consulting, and she has literally proved that a dedicated niche audience is worth far more than a massive but disengaged group of followers. And I just love what Tara teaches. Like I have loved hearing her story. I love how she is showing up for a very specific community and serving in an amazing way. Tara's story is even more inspiring to me because she used to be limited by like how many clients could she actually work with in more of like a clinical setting. And now she's taking all of her expertise and what she knows and making it available for free across the world using her podcast. I just think it's absolutely incredible and impactful. And it just makes me so excited about podcasting. Okay, hot take number 5. This one might hurt a little bit, but I'm willing to do it because I think you need a little tough love. I know we all care about launch day, but here's what I'm going to say. Launch day only matters to you. Launch day doesn't really matter. Here's what I'm going to argue does. Week 12. Week 12 matters, okay? Here's the reality check I need you to hear. Most people obsess over their launch day. And then guess what happens? They burn out by like episode 7. Like the stats are insane about how many people burn out by episode 7. The real magic happens when you are still showing up after most people have quit. And this is why I'm so passionate about creating a system that is sustainable, is because I've watched so many beautiful ideas, beautiful podcasts, incredible hosts, beautiful messages go and then fizzle out because they don't have a system. And so here is why this matters more now than ever. So again, if we think back to hot take number 1, podcast algorithms are heavily weighting consistency over initial buzz. So gone are the days where like you launch a show, you hit the top of the charts, and then you stay at the top. It's like, no, they are looking at who is showing up week in and week out, which is why my first recommendation was to figure out, can you go for 12 weeks? Now, the next thing that's different now is binge listening is the new normal. So people discover, let's say they start at episode 50, they find you, they go all the way back to episode 1. This is still happening for me 9 years into the game. Every single day, episode 1 of the Goal Digger podcast is still being listened to. It makes me cringe every single day, but that's the reality is people want to binge. So once they discover you, once they fall in love with you, once you build that know, like, and trust without you having to do any extra work on your part, they're going to go back to the early episodes. They're going to catch the things that they missed. What is amazing about this is that your podcast is this incredible content library. After you hit publish, it is still working for you. I know for our show, about 50% of our monthly downloads are our new episodes that we're releasing, and about the other 50% is our backlog, meaning people are still listening to episodes that we released years ago. What is so helpful about this is that we know that our whole economy is in a trust recession. Trust is the currency. And we know that building trust takes time. But here's the thing, podcasting gives you that time, unlike any other platform. So if I were to launch thinking not just about launch day, but week 12, here is the strategy. And again, I want to re-anchor what we talked about with hot take number 1. Thinking through of how can you launch with a little batch of episodes. I recommend launching with at least 3 episodes to get people in the practice of binging, to give them kind of different tastes of the content that you're going to be releasing, to kind of fill up those different content buckets we talked about, educational, inspirational, lifestyle behind the scenes, and start to like give them the flavor of what your podcast is going to be. Then I would look at how can I batch record or think through and plan out my first 12 episodes. Now, if you can do this before you launch, amazing. At least having a plan and a direction of where you're going, great. And again, I'd argue if you just spend a little bit of time doing some research, you are going to be overflowing with content ideas. This is coming from a girl who has recorded over 900 episodes, and I thought I'd run out after episode 8. It is possible to consistently find your creativity and to find direction that you want to deliver to your audience. And then lastly, plan out your content calendar. So at least look at the next 3 to 4 months. If you just released 1 episode a week, what would that look like? How could you cover it? How could you make sure that you get over that 7 episode hump that so many people quit at? Okay. I think we're in this state of like a podcasting paradox. And here's what I'll say. I think that weekly episodes of a podcast can create more freedom for you than daily posts on social. Why? Because podcasting creates this compound content return, and that return continues to build while you sleep, while you step off of the content posting treadmill. That podcast that you create and publish can still be working for you months and even years later. And I just can't argue the same about social media. That is why I love podcasting and I love long form content, is you can deliver real tangible results. You grow your intimacy. You are giving free value when you show up consistently. And so I feel like if we're looking at like, man, I don't have enough time, I would argue that a weekly episode will create so much more freedom in your life than trying to keep up with daily posting. Now, before I move on to my last hot take, I've got another story for you. So Kristen Mundy, she bought her microphone and headphones. Now listen to this. She bought them 18 months before she ever pressed record. Why? Because she was literally overwhelmed by everything. Like, we can all relate, right? She had a 1-year-old at home. She felt like she had no time. She probably didn't, but here's what changed everything for her. She realized that she didn't need to figure everything out before starting. So she followed my exact strategy in how to batch record, and she has 8 episodes live. She has 30 more recorded in the bank, meaning she has content that could go out for 6+ more months. She's hit 1,000 downloads. She's booked incredible guests. She has a wait list of people wanting to come on her show. And her secret was that she built systems for consistency and not perfection. That is exactly what I teach. Her words are, if I can do it with a crazy 1-year-old at home, anyone can. And I just want you to hear that. You want to build systems for consistency, not perfection. Perfection is the killer of you publishing. All right, the final hot take of the day. And this one, I think, is something that so many people overlook when it comes to podcasting. Interviews are not just content strategy. They are true business and personal development. So here's what I think we're missing. Most people think that interviews are just about getting good content or getting access to somebody else's audience. Both of those things are true, but interviews are so much more about building relationships with people in and out of your industry who can change your life and your business. We are sleeping on the fact that you can reach out to decision makers and offer them your platform of your podcast. Like, decision makers are so much more accessible through podcasting than if you were to do cold outreach to them. When you offer somebody the opportunity to share their story, share their expertise, share what they've learned, share what they love on a platform, when you position them as the hero, they're so much more likely to say yes. They're going to feel honored to be able to step onto your platform. And what's so amazing is that by simply being a podcast host, you build authority immediately, right? You are also sitting alongside of the experts. You might, in fact, become the expert. In fact, if you are somebody listening to this and you want to have a podcast and you're like, I'm not an expert in anything, what if you just helped experts deliver their messages on topics that you cared about? Like, what if that was the play that you used for a podcast? One great guest relationship can transform your entire business or life. I am literal proof of this. I have had so many incredible conversations on the podcast. Also, after we've stopped recording, like, I have had so many life-changing conversations. I've made so many incredible friends. I have built such an amazing community through this. And I think that these aspects are so overlooked because people are so quick to want to monetize it or to, even just write themselves out of the game because they think it's too busy. So the strategy now, once you realize this, is that you want to interview people that you want to collaborate with. You don't want to just interview famous people. For most famous people, they get pitched a million shows a day. A podcast to them is just another day in the office. What about people that you want to learn from? What about people you want to work with? What about people you just want to be friends with? That is an amazing opportunity that people are sleeping on. The other thing you get to do that I was terrible at the beginning, and I feel like I've grown so much in my podcasting journey is you get to make your guests look like the heroes. Like, you are not centering yourself. You get to position them as the heroes of their own story, their own expertise. You are giving them a platform and a stage, and that is such an honor. And then the cool thing is that after you have had this episode or this interview with them where you get to ask them hard questions and you get to learn from them, you also get to stay in touch with them. There is genuine relationship building happening. The minute you hop on the platform, the minute you hit record, when you stop recording, when you follow up with them, you now have this ability and a direct line to the people that you want in your world. And so if you are somebody who's thinking like, well, who am I to have a podcast? The thing is that podcasting builds authority faster than any other medium, because guess what? You're the host. You're in charge of the show. You're asking the questions. You're curating the conversation. In fact, you might not know this, but when I started Goal Digger, it was an interview only show for the very beginning because I did not feel like an expert. I did not trust my own authority. Isn't that wild? Like, I didn't think that I could carry on a conversation with myself on a solo show for a very long time. And then I realized I am a terrible interviewer because I would be interviewing people and I would want to interject my thoughts, my philosophies, my strategy. I was awful. I was horrendous. And I realized, okay, wait, I do have a lot to say. I should have solo shows. I should share my take so that when I interview somebody, I get to center them and their experience and their expertise. And I am not trying to chime in with what I think I know. And so that's when I separated my show out to interview and solo shows so that I can position my guests as the experts as they are. And then I can also share my own takes in shows just like this one. Victoria Phipps is one of my students, and she started a podcast called Mom Means Business. And honestly, when she started it, she was just thinking that she was documenting her transition back into entrepreneurship after having babies. But her interviews became her secret weapon for building industry connections. Within months of launching, she was featured on BBC Radio Berkshire, not because she was famous, but because she had built relationships with other entrepreneurs who had recommended her. The podcast for her became her networking multiplier, which opened doors she could have never accessed through cold emails or social media. I think that Victoria is so onto something. And if you want to build community, if you want to be in relationship with other people, if you want to interview experts, if you want to just have a direct line to people that you admire or you want to be mentored by, a podcast is that. I mean, my podcast has changed my life in so many different ways. Here's one quick example. Years ago, I interviewed an amazing woman named Tracy Otsuka. She had pitched herself to my show. She was an expert in ADHD. I interviewed her about ADHD, and the whole time I was just curious about learning about ADHD. I had no ulterior motive for interviewing her. After we stopped recording, she said to me, "Have you ever been diagnosed?" And I was like, "Wait, what?" And she's like, "Well, when were you diagnosed with ADHD?" And I was like, "Wait, I'm not." She's like, "I have listened to your show for years, and all of the things you have to do and the systems you've created to stay productive, to stay consistent, they are all markers of somebody with ADHD. You might be neurodivergent." She sent me down this rabbit hole of finally getting diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 34, and she cracked my life open. That would have never happened without my podcast. That is one tiny example of how my podcast has significantly shifted my life just through being able to interview people that I love watching, that I admire, that are experts in their area. And so do not sleep on that. If you want to expand your community and you want to build real relationships and you want to platform people that are changing the world and you want the world to become a better place, starting a podcast is 1000% a way to do that. Okay, now listen, I know this is kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. I've just given you 6 reasons why everyone telling you that it's too late to start a podcast is dead wrong. But knowing this and doing something about it are 2 very different things. The truth is, in 6 months, you're either going to be that person who's still talking about starting a podcast someday, or you're going to be the one with 20 episodes under your belt, the person building real relationships with your dream collaborators and watching your business grow in ways that you literally never imagined. Everything I just shared, all of the reasons why now is the perfect time, it is meant to get you closer to saying yes to starting a podcast. And I want you to know you're likely overcomplicating it all in your mind. And so if that is you, I want to walk you through all of it step by step, the starting, the launching, the monetizing of it. I have a free masterclass. And the good news here is that podcasting is actually easier than you think. Now, my free masterclass is called Podcasting 101, How to Start, Record, and Profit from Your Show. You can grab your spot at freepodcastclass.com. That's freepodcastclass, all one word.com. And I'm not just going to tell you what to do. I'm going to show you the strategy. I'm going to share the places that most people mess up, including where I totally messed up. And I'm also going to answer the questions that are probably spinning in your head right now. Your future podcast listeners are out there. And let me tell you, they are waiting for your voice. The question isn't whether you have something valuable to say. I know that you do. The question is whether you're going to let fear keep you quiet or if you're going to finally step into the spotlight that you actually deserve. Head to freepodcastclass.com. I'm here. Let's make your podcast happen because here's what we need. The world desperately needs what you have to share. And honestly, it is time that you believe that too. Now, real quick, if there's somebody in your life who you think should start a podcast, please just do them a favor and send them this episode. Let this be proof that all of their fears, that they're too late, that it's too complicated, that they're not going to get real results. Send them this as evidence that they can simply speak and change the world. You know, the friend that responds with a 5-minute long voice text, or the friend who has these conversations and you're like, I wish everyone could hear this. Send this episode to them. And if that's you, make sure that you join my masterclass, freepodcastclass.com. I can't wait to see you there. And again, just by signing up and showing up, you will get my ultimate podcast gear guide. So if the tech is holding you back, let me simplify that for you too. Sometimes seeing is believing. So let me walk you through it all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope my podcast has changed your life in all the ways we talked about and more. And until next time, goal diggers, keep on digging your biggest goals. Thanks for listening to the Goal Digger Podcast. I hope today left you inspired and equipped with something you can put into action as you build a business that truly supports your life. If this episode resonated with you, here's how you can help the show reach even more entrepreneurs. Hit follow, share it with a friend who's building something meaningful, and if you're feeling generous, leave us a review. Those reviews help other listeners discover these conversations when they need them the most. This show has become so much more than I ever imagined, and it's because of listeners like you who show up and share. You are helping build something that will inspire entrepreneurs for years to come. For show notes, links, and resources, head to goaldiggerpodcast.com. Keep digging your biggest goals. The world needs what you're building.